In this video, we're going to be solving quadratic equations, and by now you should be familiar with what a quadratic equation is. Quadratic equation has a degree of 2, which means its highest exponent is 2, and we've seen two different forms of a quadratic equation. We've seen vertex form and we've also seen standard form, and we've graphed both. But we've never solved a quadratic equation yet. So our quadratic equation that we're going to solve is this: 0 equals 2x times x plus 3. Now right off the bat, that may not look like a quadratic equation. But what if we took that equation and we got rid of our brackets? Well, to get rid of the brackets, we would need to distribute. So we're distributing that 2x into the brackets. So we're doing 2x times x, which is 2x squared, and then 2x times 3, which is 6x. So this is the equation that we get, which is equivalent. It's 0 equals 2x squared plus 6x. Now if you look at that, is that a quadratic? Well, yes it is, because it has a degree of 2. The highest exponent in this equation is 2. So this is definitely a quadratic. But this is a different form of a quadratic. It's called factored form. Factors include numbers and variables and expressions that can be multiplied together to get your product. So 2x times x plus 3 would give us this product of 2x squared plus 6x. Factored form is written as a multiplication statement, and you have seen it before when we've done distribution and multiplying binomials. But you may not have realized that it is a quadratic. So today we're going to be solving quadratic equations. Now it's much easier to solve the quadratic in factored form than if it were in this form in standard form. To solve an equation means to find the value of x that makes this equation true. Now since in this equation we have two different x's, an x squared and an x here in the second term, it's going to be hard to isolate that. So we need to make sure it's in factored form, and we will get to factoring later on. But today we're going to be solving equations that are already in factored form. So let's get to solving. We need to determine the solution to 0 equals 2x times x plus 3. So that means we're finding the value of x that makes this whole thing equal to 0. So I want you to think about something. What is anything multiplied by 0? Well, you should know that anything multiplied by 0 is just equal to 0. What if we had this first part of the equation equal to 0? So 2x is equal to 0. Well, that would mean that whatever x plus 3 is, that multiplied by 0 is equal to 0. And what if we had x plus 3 equal to 0? Well, that also means that whatever 2x is, 2x times 0 is equal to 0. So we're going to solve whatever value of x will make 2x equal to 0, and then we also need to solve whatever value for x makes x plus 3 equals to 0. So we need to break apart this equation. So we're finding the value of x that makes 0 equal to 2x, and we also want to find the value of x that makes 0 equals to x plus 3. We've broken up this equation into two separate equations, two smaller equations. So we need to solve these smaller equations separately. So 0 equals 2x. 2 is just being multiplied with x, so we need to do the opposite, which is division. So we're going to divide both sides of our equation by 2. And that gets x on its own, and 0 divided by 2 is just 0. So in one case, x is equal to 0. And in our second little equation, we're finding the value of x that makes x plus 3 equal to 0. So we need to isolate x, and since 3 is being added, we need to do the opposite, which is subtract 3. So x is just equal to negative 3. So we didn't find the same value for x, but that's okay. This just means we have two possible solutions. So our two possible solutions are when x is equal to negative 3 and when x is equal to 0. And let's actually check this just to see if it makes sense. So our equation is 0 equals to 2x times x plus 3. Now what happens if I plug in negative 3 in for x? We're going to get 0 equals 2 times negative 3 times negative 3 plus 3. Now 2 multiplied by negative 3 is just negative 6. And then in these brackets, negative 3 plus 3, well, that's just 0. And we know that negative 6 times 0 is equal to 0. Now what happens if we were to plug in this x equals 0 into our equation? So this is our original equation. If we plug in 0, it would just be 2 times 0, and then 0 plus 3. 2 times 0 is just 0, and 0 plus 3 is 3. And we know that 0 multiplied by 3 is 0. So when we plugged in negative 3 over here in for x, we got 0 in the end. So negative 3 is definitely one of our solutions. And when we plugged in 0 in for x, we got 0. So that means 0 is also one of our solutions. So we have two values for x that will make this equation, our quadratic equation, equal to 0. And that's what you're often going to find with quadratic equations. You're often going to get two different values for x. And let me just quickly show you why you get two solutions from a quadratic equations. So we know that the graph of a quadratic looks something like this. It's a parabola. It's this symmetrical U-shaped, right? Well, at 0, when y is equal to 0, and that's right here, we'll often have two possibilities. Because remember, in a parabola, it's a symmetrical U-shape, and for most of the points, there's going to be two values for x that share the same y value, just like in this equation. So when our equation was equal to 0, when y is equal to 0, that's right here, that happened at x equals negative 3, and when x is equal to 0 right here. So those are our two possible solutions to our quadratic equation when it's equal to 0. And now it's your turn. So here's your equation. I want you to pause the video and determine the solution to this equation right here. When you're done, you can come back to the video to check your answer. So here's the solution. The equation was 0 equals to negative 5x times x minus 10. So you had to find when negative 5x is equal to 0 and when x minus 10 is equal to 0. So you have to separate this equation. So negative 5 times x is equal to 0 when x is 0. And for our second little equation, x minus 10 is equal to 0 when x is equal to 10. So our solution, our two possible values for x, is when x is equal to 0 or when x is equal to 10. That will make this quadratic equation equal to 0. And now at the bottom, we have some practice questions for you to try yourself. Determine the solutions to all of these equations. And at the very bottom, we have the answers so you can check to make sure you've done them correctly.